Today we're going to continue talking about transformations. By the end of this video, you'll be able to write the equation of a function given the graph and identify the transformations that map the pre-image to the image in order to determine the equation of the image. All of that is just a fancy way of saying that you will be able to describe how a graph was transformed. So we have a graph here, and then some questions that I think are helpful in figuring out the equation of this graph. So first of all, what is the name of the parent function? This is a cube root function. The next question says, describe in words how the parent function was transformed. So I'm going to draw in the just regular old cube root function real quick. That way we can better see how the graph was transformed. When I think about transformations, I usually look at the center point in the graph. For the original cube root function, the center point is 0, 0. For this new graph, the center point is 2, -1. So this graph was shifted 2 to the right and down 1. If you look carefully, the graph was not stretched at all, it was just shifted. So then the next question we need to ask ourselves is, what would the a, h, and k values be for this transformation? Remember that a stretches or flips the graph. So since it was not stretched or flipped, a will be 1. It was shifted 2 to the right, and h deals with horizontal shifts, so h will be 2. And since it was shifted down, k deals with vertical shifts, so k is -1. Now, we have all the information we need to write the equation. The general equation for a cube root function is here. So we know that a is going to be in front of the cube root symbol, and since a is 1, if you write 1, that's fine, but you don't need to. H is 2, so we have x minus 2, and then k is -1, so we have -1 outside the cube root. So this is the equation of that graph. Now, you won't always be given all of these questions to help you figure out the equation, but you should ask yourself these questions as you're trying to figure out the equation. So same questions on this next problem. What is the name of the parent function for this graph? This is a quadratic. And remember that the shape of this graph is a parabola. Then it says, describe in words how the parent function was transformed. So I'm going to draw in the parent function. For y equals x squared. So like I mentioned last time, I usually look at either the middle point or, in this case, what's called the vertex, which we'll talk more about later. And you can see that that vertex point was moved 1 unit to the left and down 6. So it was shifted left 1 and down 6. But if you look carefully at this, the graph that we were given is narrower than the original quadratic, which means that A has done something to this graph. So I'm going to say that it is narrower. The next question says find A, H, and K. H and K are easy, and then we'll come back to A. So since the graph was shifted 1 to the left, that makes H -1. K will be -6 because the graph was shifted down 6. Now for A, the easiest way to figure out A, and this works for any parent function, start at the vertex or the center point, depending on your equation, and go 1 unit to the right, and then ask yourself how many do you have to go up to reach the graph. So if I go over 1, I have to go up 2 to reach the graph, which means that A is going to be 2. It works the same if the graph has been flipped upside down. You just have a negative A value because you're moving down to get to the graph. So now let's write the equation of this graph. We know it's a quadratic, so it's going to have parentheses squared in it. And then we know A is 2. Then you have x minus h inside the parentheses. So x minus -1 is x plus 1. And then k goes at the end. So that is the equation for the graph that we were given. Make sure that you can figure out the transformations, both describing it in words and figuring out the a, h, and k values.